Ludwig von Mises and the 6 lessons of the Austrian economic school, motherfuckers.
From the streets of Melrose Park to the trading floor of the Merc, he's fought for every dollar he's ever earned. And now, with personal liberty and our system of capitalism under assault in America, he's here to seize back our rights from the government. With a cigar in one hand and a copy of the Declaration of Independence in the other, he's Shaun Thompson. And this is the Shaun Thompson Show.
Some folks are born made to wave the flag.
Perspective is what separates successful from the unsuccessful. It's true. There's no question about it. See, the people who are unsuccessful, who live in a world of feudalism, they mainly focus on what they don't have. People who are successful, the Americans, they focus on what they do have. And we have the rule of law. You see, socialism and communism, it's illegal in America. You can't even vote somebody else's rights away if they challenge it properly. That's what we need to start doing. That's why this is a very important guest. Friend of the show, serves as the Vice President of Legal Affairs at an incredible organization, the Landmark Legal Foundation, where it's time to get him busy. Michael J. O'Neill, how are you?
Good. How are you, my friend? Good to be with you, Shaun.
It's infuriating to see what's happening if you just step back. You know, you get caught up in it because of the Department of Agitation and Propaganda known as media. Mm-hmm. But the reality is, you have a confederacy of scallywags calling themselves states, calling themselves counties and cities, and they are ignoring the federal law, and they're pretending to be legitimate. And you know the saddest part of all of this? They're 10% of the country, the same 10% that vote Democrat in every presidential election. That's the only ones that voted. 10% of the counties. Help me save ourselves by using law.
What you're seeing is willful blindness, right, Shaun? In a lot of these counties, I mean, what just came out in the past day? I mean, you see states and counties with willful blindness, with no concern whether non-citizens are on their voter rolls, whether non-citizens are participating in the electoral process, nullifying your votes, nullifying and distilling the value of your legitimately cast ballot. And it's indisputable at this time. And this is something we know, we've talked about for years at this point. It's years and years. But every so often now you get some of the truth boils up. The states can no longer hide it. New Jersey's saying that 4,000 non-citizens are on their voter rolls. 400, they've identified 400 individuals who are not eligible, who are non-citizens who cast votes in the last election. And so, again, you kind of see these echoes or these little intimations of the extraordinary amounts of just fraud and malevolence and malfeasance that occurs through our electoral process. But there's stuff we can do about it. That's the bad news. The good news is there's things we've identified a problem, and people are working to try to solve that problem. And that it's imperative that some of these solutions get through ASAP.
Yeah, and it's the illusion of ignorance, right? This is the plausible deniability that the scoundrel always is hoping for, right, to invoke that. But the reality
see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. And you pretend, you just whistle past the graveyard and pretend nothing's happening. And then you can convince yourself that nothing is happening. Absolutely.
And Michael, why I'm excited is this is the first time since the founding of the country there has ever been a man who was not cultivated in this culture of corruption known as politics at the helm. And I know that Donald Trump understands the most important thing is, are we going to continue to fund our own bankruptcy? That's what this is. You know, it's been a staggering. I always ask the audience, how could it be not one elected representative of the Democrat mafia known as the Fourth Reich, not one is upset about the money that's stolen in either Minnesota, California, New York, New Jersey, Illinois, or Ukraine? Not one is upset about the money. And the reason is they're the architects of these policies, the architects of this intention. So we need to stop funding it. Stop. You won't give us your voter rolls. We don't give you $1. Simple.
Exactly. I think there's some work on that. I mean, there's now some accountability when it comes to these NGOs. You know, we're talking about money and fraud, and we could talk about voting, but just for a second, there's work being done. You know, it was originally the Doge folks. It's the vice president's head of a task force. You have the Dr. Oz. You have the Kennedy, you have people identifying the rampant fraud in the Medicaid, Social Security programs, Medicare programs. Again, I think I've said this before on your show, Shaun, but it bears repeating. We've talked about this a lot, about the terror, the fiscal cliff we're facing as a country. and the 33 trillion, whatever it's now, probably up to now in debt that we're
just
facing.
under 40, babe.
Just under 40, right? I think a couple weeks have gone by. We haven't mentioned it. The number rises, everything. I think we could begin to get a hold of it just by canceling the fraud, identifying and removing waste, fraud, and abuse in our government. And I think that that's low-hanging fruit. And you could begin to corral it in simply doing that. Again, the fact that this money, the money that was given out to all of those NGOs at the tail end, the environmental NGOs at the tail end of the Biden administration, that's been frozen. That's being clawed back. So there are billions here, a billion here, a billion there. It adds up. I can't believe I'm actually talking like around a billion here, a billion there. But the amount of money that went out in those 4 years is truly staggering. And the amount of corruption and fraud that occurred during those 4 years is absolutely mind-boggling. There are efforts to kind of claw it back and to cease it and to have some sort of accountability. And you are seeing that. But again, there's also what we're talking about right now, the integrity in the voting system. You have people that are committed. The president just went on the television just the other day, just a couple of days ago, and talked about the compromises in our electoral system. Identifying the problem, calling out the bad actors, and beginning to take some action on it is what's necessary to restore confidence in our voting system.
So just a little, I'm a junkie, right? Money junkie, political junkie. $9 trillion was added to the debt in 4 years. That is the largest amount of money in the shortest period of time in world history. Our country, to get a $9 trillion debt, took 236 years. Joe Biden and the Democrats and Republicans did it in 4. That's the perspective to have when we discuss this. Now, I have always maintained and believed and never abandoned that Joe Biden was illegitimate because he had stolen the election. I think the flaw of this lies in the same thing you and I get back to when you laugh at me and I say I want to sue the government. Right. Social Security has never been challenged properly. It is a fraud. Joe Biden and that election has never been challenged properly, whether they slow walked it, the standing, no matter what. Well, now we have the evidence that was sequestered from the people, that was hidden, that was protected. Now it's out. Whether we talk about Fulton County or New Jersey, Arizona is a staggering crime syndicate. And that Katie Hobbs, who was the Secretary of State, is unbelievable. And all the rest of it, right? But the fact of the matter is that even with the cheat, they only ever maintain about a 10 to 11% of the counties in the country. The greatest, the one thing I do every day, really almost every day, I pull up a map of the last 8 presidential elections by county. Michael, we are at the super majority. You just feel like you're not because you're in the belly of the beast.
No, right. And yeah, exactly. And the media would have you believe that it's gaslighting. All it is traditional gaslighting, Shaun. It's you think they continue to call you crazy for your common sense beliefs. Again, it's outside the realms of reasonableness to demand that you put a stamp on a mail ballot. It's outside the bounds of reasonableness to think that you have to show identification when you vote. It's outside the bounds of reasoning to believe that all ballots should be counted by the conclusion of Election Day. In other words, you shouldn't allow the state of Washington to have 3 weeks to count their ballots, or the state of California to accept unmarked mail ballots. It's unreasonable to require citizenship verification or proof of citizenship when you register to vote. The good news here, though, is, again, we're talking about some elections in this context, is the numbers don't lie. 80% of Americans, not Democrats, not Republicans, 80% of Americans believe you should show identification when you vote. 74% of African Americans believe you should show identification when you vote. 70+% of Hispanics believe you should show identification when you need to vote. This is why the piece of legislation that's languishing in the United States Senate and in Congress, and I will give a little bit of credit where credit is due, the House of Representatives is doing everything and anything they can do. They're pulling out all the stops, reconciliation, attaching it to a defense reauthorization.
And who freezes it?
Try to get this through.
Republicans in the Senate. It's the Republicans.
Right.
This is going back to the other thing, right? But nonetheless, this goes back to our original problem. When I say ours, I'm talking about the side that is supposedly fighting the corruption. We abandoned the first argument. We abandoned it, right? If it's Social Security, attack it. It's socialism. It's illegitimate, unconstitutional. When it comes to the idea of Joe Biden, he didn't win. Everything he does from the point he was in office now is null and void because you know as well as I do. Once these bills are signed by a president, it's forever spending with 3% kickers every year. If we can,
let me stop you real quick, Shaun.
Yeah,
you got it, because I want to land on an interesting point you just made. Again, Senator Rand Paul out of Tennessee or Kentucky, I'm sorry, I disagree on a number of things, but he's calling Fauci up to testify, and they are looking at the pardons. And I've long submitted to you that the pardon process and the execution of the pardons by Joe Biden at the end of his administration were illegitimate. And I think there's a case to be made about that. And I would love to see that sort of case litigated. But that takes place. You need a prosecutor to engage on that. But I think, you see drips and drabs of this, of accountability. But there are some people that are trying to work to find this and to try to rectify, remedy some of the wrongs that were committed over the previous 4 years.
But to me, if we must move forward with setting the record straight, because
Absolutely.
If we do not, then we not only incentivize more fraud in the future. There's no penalty for stealing our money. There has to be a penalty for stealing our money. And when you look back, I think 100 years from now, Michael, kids are going to be like, what the frack were these guys thinking? When you look at how he was charged after statutes were waived, whether it's E. Jean Carroll or the paper from Trump where they said he cheated somebody and there was no plaintiff, hundreds of millions and billions of dollars. I mean, it's insane what we've lived through.
And that was the bank. Yeah, the bank. Absurd. And it was honestly, I think it was, just think about the work that was done to prevent those prosecutions from going forward. And I mean, Landmark had a small part to play in some of it, the document retention cases, the Mar-a-Lago, but and again, credit where credit is due to the Supreme Court in that context. They did hold that there was some immunity attached to some of his actions regarding the J6, so that the president couldn't be prosecuted for some of the actions when he was just seeking legal counsel. So there, at least at some point, I understand you and I, and we do this all the time. There's lots of distrust in institutions, but at some point, some instances, we get the right results. And what you were talking about right there, by hook or by crook, he was able to run for president again and get elected. And but for some of those folks on the Supreme Court, those justices, we wouldn't be in the position we are right now. Could you imagine all this stuff we're talking about? Could you imagine a different president, a President Harris, under that administration?
Oh, my word. I mean,
imagine that parade of horribles.
But they would have then really buried the abuses, the atrocities, the weaponization, and the illegitimacy that took place. We now have a chance that at least is exposed. We must go for the jugular. This information of the election theft is fantastic. But this preventing of election integrity in the future, this falls directly on the shoulders of Mitch McConnell. And I think he's dead. I think that is the greatest scandal. I think Mitch has been dead for 2 weeks. Either that or they're going to wheel him out like Gary Oldman and Dracula with his hair all done. I'm just telling you, why must I tolerate this? How can they run this kind of interference?
Here's the other one. He's not look. It's also John Thune, the Senate Majority Leader, and Lisa Murkowski. Lisa Murkowski is the senator from Alaska, and she will not budge on this. She wrote an editorial about why the Save America Act will never pass. I'd say, first of all, primary the heck out of it. The next thing is are you kidding me? You can't strike a deal with the people of Alaska for any concerns they have to alleviate them. So the whole country is held hostage by several hundred people who are worried about getting to a poll or having to show proof of citizenship.
No, it's a corrupt state that operates on government funding. It always was. She's a hand-me-down senator. Her father was as crooked as a jaybird. The father dies. She hands it down to the girl prior to his death or right after his death. I mean, that's a Chicago alderman nonsense. All these areas that exist on government fraud are corrupt. They're voting for their own self-interest. What is the true face of greed? A man who wants his own money or a thief that wants his neighbor's money? Right? That's what Alaska is. Alaska's a welfare state, always has been. Now, should it be because the government handcuffs them from taking advantage of their natural resources? Okay, that's a separate argument. Nonetheless, why has she never been primaried anyway? She's an offense to any kind of integrity. She's a handmaid. She was the daughter of a crooked politician. It's right out of Chicago alderman stuff.
Look, there's sins you can't forgive, and for me, from that perspective, the sin you can't forgive if you can't support the Save America Act. I don't care what you do subsequent to that. I don't care what you do behind that. If you can't get behind a piece of legislation that 80% of Americans agree on is necessary, then you are not representing your constituency, and that is something to botch a quote from a famous movie. That is something I cannot forgive.
I agree, but it always is about the money. This wouldn't mean anything if we didn't have to bail it out.
But here's the thing: is I It is, but my point is pay the money, whatever's necessary at this point, by hook or by crook. Drag some of these provisions, drag the identification on when you vote in a federal election, the mandatory identification when you vote in a federal election. Whatever you have to do to get that piece of legislation through the Congress of the United States should be done. Whatever you have to do to mandate that you have to establish that you're a citizen when you register to vote. These are common sense, necessary provisions that need to get forward to restore. Again, 40%, at least 40% of the United States has lost faith in the integrity of the electoral system. And that in and of itself is a national tragedy, Shaun, and we need to do something immediately to rectify that.
Well, and I always say, if you look at the states that are fighting this, these are the states that are bankrupt. These are the states that exist on an illusion of any kind of financial solvency. These are the most corrupt states in America. There has to be a way to detach the decent from the indecent by law. That's what the whole country is, right? That's the beauty of the republic. The beauty of the republic is even if a certain cancer of corruption infects XYZ states, the decent have the ability to offset the liability. You can't legislate me into servitude, or at least in theory you can't. What's the best way for Landmark Legal to attack it? I want to get my name on the fracking thing. Shaun Thompson fights the world. Landmark Legal Foundation is my representation. Come on.
We'll keep putting our heads together and try to arrive at an answer to that, Shaun.
I'm telling you, we do this little by little, and when you hear and you see what's going on with this illusion of, this is the other thing, Michael. There's no such thing as communism. It's a theory. There's no such thing as socialism or Marxism. What it is the power of the collective to abuse and extort the true minority, the individual, with perpetuity, forever in existence, and there are no rules. Why hasn't there been challenges by these landlords in New York that are having their fracking property taken away from them? How can you explain there's no lawsuit yet?
Hey, there was one thing I wanted to mention to you, too. I read about it today, and I thought about you. I said the fact that if you see the political breakdown of the people who have advanced collegiate degrees who make less than $100,000 are some of the most angry people in the world, and they all skew left, right? And the people who make over $100,000, $200,000 a year without a high school degree are the people who skew right the most. What does that tell you, right? The hardworking people of America who go out there with their sweat and their effort and make something out of their lives. It's not a coincidence where they fall on the political spectrum, is it, Shaun?
No, it's the useful versus the useless. It always has been.
Exactly.
What we've done, what my generation really perpetrated, and because I'm the one that could be their father, right? You could be, and what we've done is we've taught this generation that is now graduating from college, these kids who would still even entertain the idea of a philosophy that's responsible for the death of 180 million people around the world. What we've done is we gave them, not me, but my generation gave them trophies for showing up. Right. And you go to college. College when I was a kid. You know who went to college? People who had no ambition. Nobody that I ever knew who went to college had ambition. Everybody I knew, we couldn't wait to go to work. We were dying to go to work when we were sophomores in high school. We wanted to bite everything and make as much as we can and fool around with some of our friends' girlfriends. That's how we lived. But now they want to go to college and they want to get out and say, ooh, I'm entitled to $400,000 a year. So these are the kids who went to soccer, went to football, went to baseball, and sucked, and they got a trophy. What do you expect? I mean, I'm surprised it's not worse, quite honestly.
Right, and you do this. If you do go to school, you go to do what? To become with a goal of becoming marketable and having a skill to sell in the public sphere, and not to just go and navel gaze for 4 years, or God forbid, 7 years if you want to achieve some sort of graduate degree.
Do you know my favorite reality of the Founding Fathers? I mean, you could argue about so many of them and who they were and how many were young and all the rest of it. But who's the real intellect that started the whole thing with the leather apron society, the reason he's on the $100 bill, right? It's Benjamin Franklin. Benjamin Franklin, who founded Penn State. I mean, his whole articulation.
University of Pennsylvania.
Yeah, University of Penn. But he started all the papers that started all the information about making people think. He was arguably the greatest intellect of them all. He left school at 10 years old.
Yeah, the width and breadth of his achievements is astounding. When you get into any of the biographies of some of these guys, it's beyond belief. And the fact that he lived so long was amazing too. For that, think about that. If he weren't again, I always go to divine providence with those guys. The fact that he managed to continue on and have such a long, extended life to be able to influence those founders, the founding generation was incredible.
He left school. He left school when he was 10 years old. He signed an indentured servant agreement with his brother for 9 years when he was 11. Did you know that? It's amazing when you look into this guy. It's amazing.
Absolutely mind-boggling. The fact that, not to get a few of it, the fact that George Washington wasn't killed in the French and Indian War was, again, divine providence. There's no way that you can look at what the risks he placed himself into. How many horses were shot out from under him, for example?
Oh, it's
the fact that he'd go into these skirmishes and everybody around him would be shot and killed, but he would live. There's no other conclusion that you can draw other than the fact that it was divine providence was looking out for him.
And it all boils down to kids who want something for nothing, but they don't have the will to fight for it.
Right.
And, I don't know if you saw in the Cubs game, I'm not a sports guy, but I watched that old man crack that young punk who wouldn't stand up for the national anthem. Did you see it?
Yep, on the back of the head. Absolutely.
Now there's a
you need more of that.
There's a tell there. And the tell is the not just the capitulation after he got cracked in the head, which by my house was called a how you doing or good morning, but the look on his face of fear. Here's an 80-year-old man. He'd have a hard time opening up a ketchup bottle. He slapped you in the head. You were terrified. The reason they subscribe to this philosophy is because it is the philosophy of cowards. A socialist is a coward. A communist is a coward. Marxists are cowards. That's who subscribes to the American Democrat Party today are cowards. And that's what we need to focus on.
Always. Takers, not providers. I mean,
Exactly.
Just what can you take? You come into society, you're locusts. You just decide what can we take from this wonderful society that's been built by our forefathers and our traditions, and people try and continue, as I say, people who want to go out and build something. We come in, we don't build, they take. They don't build, they take. They take what we build. They profit off our sweat and our hard work. And again, the accountability comes into it. And this is why it's so imperative to restore the faith in the justice in the electoral system. And so we all can continue to believe we can effectuate change via the ballot box.
And I am telling you, it's law that will set us free. The rule of law. It really is. It's you, brother. You were the one that was smart enough to get your law degree. I'm the one smart enough to have Landmark Legal Foundation on and you. So I appreciate you doing this. Where's the best place? Landmarklegal.org, correct?
You got it, brother. You got it, my friend.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate you making time. I know how busy you are. Thank you.
Always. Talk to you soon, Shaun. Bye-bye.
Right. We'll be back with your calls and comments.
Marxists, socialists, and communists are not welcome on the Shaun Thompson Show on AM 560. The Answer.
Adult Beverage Solutions is looking for a brand ambassador in all areas for beverage sampling events. You have the ability